Well, we've consistently said that the three-eye monster of housing unaffordability has been looking at the lack of inventory, high interest rates, and that rapid inflation, especially over the past 5 years or so. But it is also that fourth is now insurance is creeping up there as one of the reasons why housing is unaffordable. What is another thing you don't see behind me are the bad policies that we prevented from being signed into law.
It's kind of a myth that we're only here for the realtors, because if homeowners can't afford homes, we're out of a job.
Welcome back to Nevada Realtors Today, your place for timely updates on the news and trends that matter to realtors in the Silver State. Featuring your host, 2026 President Sarah Scatini, and CEO Tiffany Banks of Nevada Realtors. Now let's jump into today's episode of Nevada Realtors Today.
We are so grateful here at Nevada Realtors to have the incredible Shannon McGann joining us today. I also have Grant Meyer, our Nevada Realtors President-elect, and Azim Jessa, our Nevada Realtors Vice President and most recent Legislative Chair, joining us today. Thank you all for being here.
I can't believe we have the myth, the legend herself, Shannon, with us today. Thank you so much for taking time away from your very, very busy schedule to join us. We really appreciate it. As you look at the national level, what are some of the top advocacy priorities that realtors should really be paying attention to right now? And how does NAR decide which of those issues, rise to the top when there's so many competing demands on you and our advocacy team?
Well, first off, thank you so much for including me in this podcast. I am grateful to be with you. I wish it were in person. So next time we can plan a meetup. I'm happy to leave DC every once in a while, especially if you are in Vegas or have something else going on there. But for now, this will suffice. And we have plenty to talk about on what's happening when it comes to housing issues at the national level. You know how Webster's Dictionary has their word of the year? It'll be like Swifty one year or Riz another year.
I believe was last year. That's what my kids
Exactly.
tell me anyway.
I think this year it should be affordability because that is the word that is on everyone's mind and has come up, especially in the housing debate over the last several months. And there's a reason why. Housing affordability and inventory remain the top issues, and having that lack of inventory around the country is driving up housing costs and making it less available, less affordable, less accessible for many Americans. Our amazing research team, Dr. Lawrence Yoon and Dr. Jessica Louts, put out a research report every year that looks at the median first-time home buyer. And last year, that age hit a record, or earlier this year, I should say, of 40 years old. So first-time buyers are now making up just under a quarter of the market, which is historically low. And so we do what advocacy groups do and say, let's find out what voters think about this. Let's go into the field and poll voters and find out, are they seeing these same issues and are they taking those to the ballot box as we would expect? And in that polling, we found that 84% support efforts that are going to make down payments more affordable, that are going to allow for better tax support to ensure that they have the money to be able to get into home ownership, that three-quarters support things like being able to sell a home without paying capital gains taxes so that more homes are coming on the market and can be purchased by first-time buyers. And we also saw that there is strong bipartisan majorities to support tax incentives tied to increasing housing supply and making it more affordable. So these are the exact issues that we're working on here in DC every day, getting Congress to not just create that legislation, but how to develop that bipartisan support, and just as importantly, bicameral support. For those of you who are not interested in legislative jargon, bicameral means both the House and the Senate, and making sure that each of those bodies are taking these issues seriously and moving these policies throughout the process. So our advocacy is preparing to come for all of you to come into town. We're looking forward to hosting you in June for our Realtor legislative meetings, where thousands of realtors will descend upon Capitol Hill. I recall in my close to 20 years of working on and around Capitol Hill that whenever the realtors are in town, you want to make sure that you packed your lunch that day because those lines in the cafeteria are going to be brutal. So this year, there will be nothing different, and we will be talking about these issues in addition to the two major housing packages that have moved through the House and Senate and that we're trying to get over the finish line.
Yeah, Shannon, I actually really love that you talk about that. We oftentimes talk about our partnerships between the local, state, and national level. And while you're busy in DC working those important issues, we're making sure that we have this education piece here in the state. All of the research and data have shown that even this younger generation doesn't think that they can purchase a home or that it's out of their reach, or the opportunity to have the American dream of owning a home is like so far away, and your statistics clearly show that. But right now we're trying to think about ways that we as an organization can go into high schools, colleges, and make sure that they know, number one, that this is all possible, number two, how to get there. Part of that is becoming possibly a realtor themselves, or just knowing you can become literate, financial literacy.
Learn more about the home buying process, whether
Yes.
you're going to enter our career
Mhm.
path or just hopefully be able to purchase your own home, right?
Absolutely.
What are the steps it takes to
Yeah.
get there? We know that if you're a homeowner, you have what, 10 times, 100 times the amount of uh, net wealth, and build that, long-term financial stability for your family versus being a renter. And Azim and I, one of our goals is to try to get as many Nevadans to own their homes as possible, right, Azim?
Yeah, absolutely. Shannon, you're going to correct that number though. What is it? 40, right?
40, Azim, you got
40.
it. You got it.
Yeah.
And that is something that we're
It was something
communicating
like that.
across.
10 to 100. I mean,
40,
perfect math, you know?
7.
Yes.
Hey, I thought we were getting rid of that one. My kids tell me that I've used 6, 7 enough that they never want to hear it again. So that's the way to kill it.
So I'm going to stay on federal policy for a second here. And I also probably need to apologize to Grant and anyone else that was in an Uber with Shannon and I during President's Circle, because all we talked about was hockey because we're hockey parents. And yeah, so that's a great connection. If you're a hockey parent, there you go. There's your in. If you want to get a word in with Shannon at a conference, flip in there and be like, yeah, my
There
kid.
was a lot of carpool karaoke going on at that time too, which we will not discuss publicly, but hockey, yes, that one's safer.
So what's one federal policy that's not getting enough attention yet, right? You see what's happening, you can kind of, you have your finger on the pulse. So what's going to happen in the future here that could significantly impact real estate that maybe we're not giving enough attention to at this point?
Oh, geez. If I can name a lot more than one, but I do want to mention that the reason this affordability um, concern, this question, is at the forefront of the policy and political debate. I just spent several hours watching the California gubernatorial debate, the LA mayor debate, and I am a mean hockey mom, so I made my sons join while we watched this. And you need to get a little taste of what's going on around the country and what issues are popping up. And when the very first two questions in the gubernatorial debate were about housing and affordability, my 10-year-old looks at me and says, "Hey, that's the stuff that you do for a living, right?" And it like finally clicked that when he's hearing me on in so many conversations and Zooms and things, that like this stuff is what matters to everyday
Every
working people who are trying to make ends meet and trying to make home ownership affordable. I will note that the second question that came up in California's the governor's debate was on insurance, and that is what I would say is the it's not
Thank you,
necessarily
Sandra.
a federal
Thank
policy issue.
you.
That I mean, it's not something that we want to be an issue because it's a very difficult one to solve for, because at the federal level, Congress is not allowed to regulate insurance. Back 100 years ago, there was a piece of legislation called McCarran-Ferguson that moved through that insists that any type of insurance regulation is going to happen at the state level, which is why you see that as such a huge issue. But at the federal level, there isn't a federal regulatory body. You'll see things like the National Flood Insurance Program or the Terrorism Risk Insurance Program. Those types of things have a federal component, but that's very different than it being regulated at the national level. But we are increasingly seeing the cost of insurance starting to make home ownership unaffordable. So it's looking at your taxes and insurance is costing more than your principal and interest. That is a pretty unbalanced equation when it comes
Scary,
to homeownership.
scary concern for a lot of people, for sure.
Yeah. And it's a valid point there, Shannon. Like I think, sometimes realtors we take a lot of heat for and unnecessarily. We don't control prices, right? We're the, we're the middleman in that transaction, helping people facilitate and guiding them and educating them and, giving them advice and whatnot. We're not setting the prices of homes. And you're right, right? Insurance is a big part of it, right? Even then outside of the actual price of homes, you got utility costs going up and all these things that make housing less and less affordable. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. So
Well, we've consistently said that the three-eye monster of housing unaffordability has been looking at the lack of inventory, high interest rates, and that rapid inflation, especially over the past 5 years or so. But it is also that fourth is now insurance is creeping up there as one of the reasons why housing is unaffordable. And actually, President Kevin Brown has been an amazing leader, and coming from California, where they have seen this for years as being an escalating issue. He has put together, through our advocacy efforts, a working group that is directly engaging with top insurance leaders and economists and business practitioners and folks to see what are these root causes and how can we make sure that the insurance industry is working with us, not leaving markets, not creating more research reports and things showing why these costs are going up, but how are we going to be able to tackle the root cause? And a big part of that are the mitigation costs that are needed to make sure that we're making homes that are resilient to the climate, resilient to any other types of events and things that could be going on, so that we understand how to keep those insurance costs lower.
awesome.
Great.
Absolutely.
That's a huge,
Uh-huh.
huge topic for me. So I'm really glad to hear that you guys are making some major headway with that. Thank you,
Are
Shannon.
you volunteering for this task force? We can
Anytime, anytime. Insurance has been my pet issue for many years, and I know Nevada being right next to California, we see a lot of that overlap of those policies. Being the state, that many of those insurance companies use as a kind of a model for our state, and many of our members of our associations are really challenged with some of their clients getting insurance in our state.
And we actually passed a piece of legislation, AB 376, last session that we call like the sandbox rule, where the Division of Insurance is able to bring in some of these different insurance companies and approve them on a case by case basis to get more insurance companies in Nevada to help lower and offset some of those costs. And so we're happy always to be a good partner and bring in. We also have an expert here in Nevada, Dr. Sean McCoy, who runs the LEAD Institute. He actually did his doctorate paper 20 years ago when people thought he was silly on a pig farm and insurance and something. And so he knows those issues inside and out. So anything that we can do to always be a great partner with you all, we're here to be that.
We'd love to help. Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, well, I will share all of that with our team, and that could be Dr. McCoy could be a great speaker. And also, we work directly with our government affairs directors throughout the country to make sure that when states are able to move forward with these important policy solutions, that it doesn't just remain in that state, that Nevada's solutions can be spread to Louisiana and Florida and other states that are having similar issues, so that those best practices can be shared.
Yeah. So Shannon, we talk a lot about the struggles, the struggle. This is a challenge. Insurance is a challenge. Affordability is a challenge. Let's celebrate a win. Talk us through a W. What was your last really good day to day state national W that we can tout and bring some good news to our members as well?
How much time do we have here,
Oh,
Grant?
come on, we got all day.
Well, and if there's a possibility of sharing some of these resources, we actually have an entire website that is dedicated to our advocacy wins, not just the most recent, but looking back at decades of wins, because sometimes people kind of forget the wins and then go on to whatever the next battle is, but we build upon those wins. And so it's important to remember them so that we can share in those practices and make more of those happen. So one that comes to mind that is a win that if you look behind me, I've got a nice wall here of pieces of legislation that I worked on Capitol Hill. And that's when you can get the congressional leaders, committee chairmen, the president himself to sign this legislation and display it. And so it's a nice reminder of what we've worked on. But what is another thing you don't see behind me are the bad policies that we prevented from being signed into law. And I think those wins are often bigger than the ones that we do celebrate, but they get much less attention. So one example I will use is that uh, I asked Evan Lydiard, who is our amazing tax policy expert. He has forgotten more than I will ever know on taxes, but and has been with us for many years. And I said, Evan, can you take a look at all of our advocacy efforts over the last several Congresses to do things like preventing limitations or even ending 1031 like kind exchange, which was very much on the table as part of then President Biden's budget and others. Things like how we were able to stop what Evan calls the ugly 11 tax proposals. So these are areas in capital gains. These are things like SALT deduction and others. And say over that 10-year window that they're scored, how much in tax hikes were we able to prevent through our advocacy efforts, and showing that any type of investment that's going into home ownership, that's going into real estate, actually brings more back into the community and drives that type of home ownership wealth and generational wealth that is more important than it being removed as part of a tax policy. The answer is $2.3 trillion in new taxes that were prevented because of our advocacy efforts to stop those harmful tax proposals. Again, not something that usually gets a press release, but when we have folks going into the Ways and Means markup and everyone thinks 1031 is on the table and that's going to be eliminated, and at the end of the markup, 1031 never even came up, it's because of months and years of dedication and education and research and relationships and working with these policymakers so that they know as much as we do about the importance of these programs. So that's one that I would argue is a big one. We also had like during the pandemic, this isn't a recent win, but something that was huge, making sure that independent contractors were included in all of those pandemic era PPP loans and the CARES Act, that we were declared an emergency service. Like those are all things that were very difficult and tough going at the time. And then looking back, kept real estate afloat for those couple of years. And so we saw a lot of transactions and a lot of growth within the industry that were able to happen. And then we just continued on those efforts by ensuring that independent contractors are being considered throughout the policymaking process. So another area is ensuring things like that independent contractors have the ability to operate. 89% of our members are independent contractors, and we poll and talk to them. And it's not because they have to be, it's because they want to be. It's by design. It is an important feature for the career that many people choose. And there have been several attempts, both regulatory and legislatively, to get rid of that independent contractor status. And we've been able to successfully navigate around all of those.
That's awesome.
Job. Thank you.
So I'm glad I'm not the only person. So if you can see back here, I've got a governor's AB 540 bill signed here, and I just haven't framed them yet with their pens and everything. So I thought, I was like, man, am I being a bit of a nerd keeping that? But I'm glad you have them. Granted, I don't have
There's
a signature like I can see behind you, but
it's a really cool
Sorry, we just have a
PC
pretty.
thing. You can go, I don't know the size, you get send me the measurements, but you can go there's a store inside the House office buildings that has the pre-cut mats and frames just for the signed legislation.
Yeah.
we'll get it. We'll be there in a couple of weeks. We'll grab one.
Steve, we'll bring an extra suitcase so you can
Yeah.
bring a couple home.
Instead of Kentucky trips, we're bringing back frames, right? So, well, Shannon, you actually touched on my next question, which was how can local association and state associations work better together to amplify NAR's impact? And you touched on having GADs get together, and so that is something I know that we've started in the last couple of years in our Region 11 meetings. We're having a GAD specific session and get-togethers. So I'll jump to the next one. So we're going to touch a little bit on policy impact if possible. So housing affordability and inventory remain major concerns, right? So what's NAR doing at the federal level that's actually moving the needle, right? We hear about a lot of talk and there's a lot of gridlock in Congress, but what are we doing that's actually moving the needle? And what changes or regulatory changes could immediately help housing supply?
Oh gosh, so that's a lot to unpack there, and I will give you many of these. But also, if you go to advocacyimpact.realtor, we have many resources available for all of these things, including our Washington report is linked there. Which anytime we are engaging with a regulatory agency, we're putting a quick summary of what those actions are, maybe a letter that we're sending, and others. So I want to make sure that your uh, wonderful audience here knows that if I don't cover it, there is 90% chance that we did something on it, and all of that's available on advocacyimpact.realtor and also on flyin.realtor, flyin.realtor, where we have all of our talking points that we take to Capitol Hill, not just at RLM, but we're doing this year round. We just had some folks from the Great Lakes here last week to do their Hill meetings. And the number one focus is, of course, increasing housing supply across all price points, expanding those tax incentives that are tied to development, and just getting more homes out there that are built and more that can be added on to the market. The immediate things that we're doing here are focused on their two different housing bills that have moved between the House and the Senate. They're still coming to some reconciliation on which one will make it to the president's desk. And so, depending on when folks see this, I don't want to put my finger on the scale of how it's going to work, but we've been very active, involved in the creation of both of those packages. And I will take us back to, when was it? 6 or 7 years ago, when we, Dr. Yoon put out our landmark research report showing that we are millions of units short of a healthy real estate economy, and that inventory is the number one challenge to making housing more affordable. And we have been working on things like YIMBY bills, yes, in my backyard, to expand or modernize zoning and land use policies, policies to convert underutilized commercial properties, which is, we've especially seen since the pandemic. How, wherever possible, can you turn that into housing? How do you expand any financing tools for first-time buyers and make sure that folks who are ready and able to come to the table and buy a home have access to all the tools that are needed, including all of our efforts for decades to protect and preserve the 30-year fixed rate mortgage. The number one policy that you're going to hear from us in June is the More Homes on the Market Act. That will modernize the capital gains exclusions to help free up existing inventory. We're all old enough to remember the 1900s. So in 1997, that was the time that this exclusion was set into law, that when you go to sell your primary residence, you will not have to pay capital gains up to $250,000 for a single person and $500,000 for a married couple. You get that exclusion right there. That applied to like every home back then, because you didn't have a lot that were selling for over $500,000. After inflation, after decades of home value growth, that is applying to much fewer homes. Right now, roughly 30% of all homes that could be available for sale would be subjected to that capital gains tax. And in 10 years, you're looking at 70% of homes that would be subjected to that tax. That is preventing people from selling. When you have put so much money and time and resources and dedication into your home, and then decades later you go to sell and you're being told you got to pay a 20% home sales tax to Uncle Sam, we're seeing across the country, no matter the market, buyers saying, never mind, I will just stay here. Even if I want to downsize, even if I want to sell to another owner occupant, I will just stay in. So that lock-in effect is keeping so many homes from being available for sale. And the issue isn't just in high cost states, because you're seeing this happen around the country just because those numbers have not been changed since 97. So we have over 110 co-sponsors. It's a massively bipartisan bill. We have House and Senate support. And so we're working with leadership to make sure that if there's another opportunity to do a tax bill this year, that could be something that is considered, and that it will have an immediate impact on folks and their ability to put their home on the market.
That would be great. And because as soon as we start freeing up some of those homes, you get a trickle down effect, right? Everybody steps up, you free up starter homes and starter properties for those first time home buyers that we know are the lifeblood of our industry. What a great idea.
Absolutely. Azine, you love talking about the PAC and political involvement. Do you want to fire off the next
Yeah,
question?
absolutely. So there's often confusion about RPAC and political involvement. What does this success actually look like from your perspective, and why does realtor participation matter so much? Right, like you're in the halls of Congress. How does RPAC help that?
Oh, well, it is this is an amazing organization to work with for many, many reasons. Being 1.4 million realtors around the country in every zip code who are dedicated professionals who know what's going on in your backyard. And to have that funneled through such a large political operation. I work with other trade associations and organizations who are all here in DC, and people are just amazed to see the size and scope of what realtors do around the country when it comes to political activity. And it's important that we look at there's the NAR dues when you're paying roughly 19 cents a day is what a member will pay for advocacy portion of those dues. That we're using that to fight on Capitol Hill for things like public issues advocacy, that direct lobbying support, and then a large portion, half if not more, goes right back to the states to make sure that we're engaged on things like pushing back on rent control, zoning matters, engaging in any kind of housing policy at the state and local level, and a partnership through that three-way agreement. So that means that where there is action that needs to be taken, that we're coming in with the force of not just your local association, but your local tied to your state, tied to the national organization, all rowing in the same direction. And when it comes to RPAC, we're looking at about a 98% success rate last cycle when it comes to electing those candidates who support realtors and support the realtor party and our values. That is something that we're incredibly proud of. And it's not just because, hey, we won these races. It's because we know that we're directing those resources to those races that really need it and people who are focused on these issues and have been long advocates. You all know in Nevada because there's plenty going on there. And we're involved, whether it's with Senator Cortez Masto or Congressman Horsford, that we've been involved in many of these races. And it's an important aspect of what all political action committees do. But I'm biased. I think we do it the best.
Can I follow up quick with that? So just on bipartisanship, right? We are a bipartisan or nonpartisan PAC. We support candidates who support real estate and private property rights, right, in our industry. So there's 535 plus or minus members of both the House and the Senate right now, right, depending on vacancies and whatnot. Can I ask you, like, and you obviously you don't have to name names, but how many of those people are actually roadblocks to housing?
Oh,
Okay, I want to name it. I want name.
oh, name. Okay. Let me just send you the section right now. I think using the term roadblock is interesting because a lot of times what we've seen are there are members of Congress who are passionate about housing, but they might not be on a committee that we're working with as much. They might not have as many of pathways forward. And so we recognized that several years ago. And I talked to our advocacy team who we have a split down the middle lobbying team that works in House, Senate, Republican, Democrat, incredibly bipartisan. And Azim, to your point, we have RPAC has a roughly 50-50 history and giving to Republicans or Democrats. Sometimes it's 49-51, but there's really no other political organization that is as bipartisan and as large as what RPAC is doing. So when we were seeing that folks, maybe they were roadblocks, but they were saying, oh, I like that issue, but I'm not on that committee. And so I don't know that I can get involved there. We thought, let's go and find those members who want to be more engaged in real estate, who may not have that pathway forward and create one. So we helped work with some members to set up the bipartisan real estate caucus that is now over 110, 120 members. And that is an organization that has 4 original co-chairs, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, including a former realtor, to say, let's come together and talk about these issues, not through the lens of a particular committee or like it has to be this legislation, but bringing in research experts, bringing in Dr. Jessica Lautz and our friends with the mortgage bankers or with NAREIT or others and say, here's what's going on when it comes to real estate and how we can be resources for you and help you move this along. There are several members out there who may not have the same position on supporting homeownership. And there are a lot of folks who are popping up at the local and state level too. And I'm sure you can see the news about that. But our job is to make sure that where we do have those leaders who support private property rights, who support home ownership, and unleashing that type of access and that type of wealth building and generational wealth transfer, that we're there to be their supporters.
Awesome. Thank
But
you.
Shannon, not all of our members are as involved and dedicated to the legislature and have bills behind their heads like Azim does. Some of our members are feeling, less interested in politics or even disillusioned by the entire process. What's something we can tell them? What's the easiest, simplest thing they can do to still make an impact? Because we remind people that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, right? And so how do we get those members that are less involved to still make an impact? What's the easiest thing they can do?
Well, first off, I am jealous of any members who can tune out the politics and tune out the legislation and the policy, because that means that their business is going great and that they have other more active and interesting things. I'm a political junkie. I cannot do that. So my job is to do that for them. So I would first say to that member, please, thank you for the opportunity for myself and for our team to represent you in DC, because we don't want you to have to worry about that day in and day out. We want to be the ones who worry for you and make sure that these policies are not impacting your ability to do your job and your customers' ability to buy and sell homes. The other thing that I would say is that voting is the most important thing you can do. And we have a really high voting rate when it comes to members of NAR, and I'll pull those up, but I believe it's like 82 or 85% of our members vote, which is a huge number compared to other industries, but it should be 100%. And where we can work to make sure that folks know that when you go to vote, you're naturally going to pay more attention to what's happening in the news. And we communicate directly with realtors, opportunity races, which is where we do a direct contact with our members in each state and say, here's what's on the ballot. Here's someone you may want to support. Those are the types of communications that we have. But most importantly, to make sure that you have access to the information and the resources and what we're doing so that they feel comfortable knowing that they have representation in DC on their behalf.
Thank you. That's
Yeah.
great.
And I think you're making all excellent points. If we're all doing our jobs right, you have way less as a member to worry about, whether it's sales tax on services. And when you talk about those $1 trillion numbers, whenever you point our member to just one thing or independent contractor status that you've done for them or their client, sometimes that helps sink in. But the better we're doing our jobs, the less they really have to worry about.
Absolutely. And Grant, you mentioned, I love the line that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And we pride ourselves in not only being at the table, but being the ones who set the table and who bring the potluck and know that this is what's going to be discussed
We're
today.
writing the menu. I love that, Shannon. That's great.
And thanks for bringing up the voting numbers as well. So quick shout out to Las Vegas Realtors. I know we track those numbers down here, and we voted about 10 to 12% higher than the general population every election cycle. And it's a big, just some recognition to Joe Bresney, our LVR GAD, and the folks of LVR who do take it seriously. So it's great to hear. And like you said, it's hugely important. Joe always says there's nothing better than walking into a legislator's office and being like, hi, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so, I'm with the Realtors and almost 90% of us voted last time. And then he just stops and he's quiet. And then generally the answer is, well, that's amazing. What can we help you with? Right? It's the answer you get back right away.
Exactly.
And
But I would be remiss if I did not mention that we will have a call for action coming out soon. So we don't do these very often. Typically, we try to make sure that we're covering things here in your nation's capital so that we don't have to bother members and say, hey, call your congressman for this. But on the More Homes on the Market bill, on the capital gains issue, where we are hoping that there is an opportunity this summer for this to be taken up. And so we will have a call for action coming out soon. So anyone listening, please look out for that. And also just meeting with local officials. It doesn't have to mean coming to Capitol Hill. We love it when you do. Very proud of those events. But at the same time, being involved at the local level is just as important, if not more. And just making sure that you're sharing those housing market, the realities, and telling the stories of you as a business owner, as an independent contractor, and your clients. One thing I would hear all the time when I worked on Capitol Hill is, you'd have a story of a constituent who had a problem, and they'd share it in the congressional record or in a speech, and folks would say, "Oh, well, that's anecdotal evidence." Anecdotal evidence is evidence. It matters, and those personal stories are people on the Hill are grateful to hear them, and will use them more than you know.
Yeah. Our legislators don't know unless we tell
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. And Shannon, we're revamping our government affairs program here at the state. And part of that is creating state political coordinators. And so, for any of our members listening, if you do have a personal relationship with a legislator, because oftentimes they'll call their own realtor, they'll call someone they trust and rely on. So, we're looking to really build out our team of state political coordinators who know and understand our issues, who have those personal relationships with the legislators so they can call them and know what we're all talking about is real, is valid, and is part of what the practitioner deals with on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, lobbying's often a dirty word, but what I've learned being involved more and more is that legislators don't know everything about everything, right? And oftentimes they'll come out of their industry, they may know a lot about that, but they don't know about housing, they don't know about finance, they don't know about banking, all these things. So these lobbyists are there also to educate them. And yes, yeah, we're fighting for our issues and advocating for our members, but at the end of the day, we're also making sure, right? Like if we need the public to be served, right? We need people to be able to buy and sell houses, right? It's kind of a myth that we're only here for the realtors, because if homeowners can't afford homes, we're out of a job at the end of the day, right? If people can't buy homes because they're too expensive or they're too difficult to buy or sell, as we've seen in other markets. I've been involved in the global world and I've traveled to other countries with NAR, and it's really difficult to do real estate in a lot of markets. And we are blessed to have the system that we do. And if we give that up because we're not out there fighting politically for it, we're doing ourselves and our country a disservice.
Absolutely. And I will note that lobbying, it might sound like a dirty word. It is a First Amendment protected right to petition your government. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise.
Yeah.
That's right. All right, Shannon. Let's look forward. What do you see? Pull out your crystal ball. 3, 4, 5. I won't say 6, 7 years down the road. What do you see coming down the federal level that our members should that could really impact our industry going forward to really change things?
So when I started at NAR, gosh, almost 8 years ago now, I used to mention this often, this crystal ball, and someone sent me a crystal ball, and I have it back here somewhere. I got to bring it out so to have that available for these types of questions. Just did a panel with the Land Title Association, and we were talking about similar issues, and I think look at this twofold. There are policy issues that could be coming in the next several years. And then there's also the political dynamic and the climate and how we are able to navigate through those issues. And what we're seeing is that there's a lot more funding coming in. Senate races that used to cost tens of millions of dollars are now costing hundreds of millions of dollars. House races are costing in those tens of millions of dollars. And so it's a very expensive market to run for office. And there are a lot more players. So you have political action committees, but then you also have the ability of corporations and major donors and others to come in and just drop tens of millions of dollars. So I think that's really going to alter a lot of how this is seen over the next decade. And we have a policy within the advocacy group. It's more like a mission or a goal is to look ahead at the next 10 years of advocacy. What does that look like? And how do we beat everyone else to it? So we have spent every election cycle modernizing a different component of either the ability to donate to super PACs or the ability to give personal donations to our members. So we started the Pro Property platform that launched in August of last year. And I know Nevada has used it several times very successfully, where you can give direct donations to a federal candidate that doesn't have to go through one of the other portals that will end up taking a cut. And then when it shows up as coming from the platform. And folks know that that is coming from Realtors, RPAC, and this is something that we're supporting. So where we're modernizing in those areas is to make sure that that voice, that when we're speaking with that voice isn't diminished and that it's louder than ever. On the policy side, I have long worked in housing policy, and I'm just going to take the crystal ball. GSE reform is going to come back up again, guys, at some point. So it was brought up during the financial crisis, Dodd-Frank, the Fannie and Freddie being put into a conservatorship. It comes up every once in a while. It's been really quiet lately. There's discussion of the President Trump's administration wanting to do an IPO for Fannie and Freddie that could result in like $500 billion of money that's unleashed, but that's right now being swept to Treasury. So I do think that's something that we have long been leaders when it comes to policy and the ability to potentially go convert to a market utility type program. And those conversations are still happening, but within the next 5 years or so, I would guess that would be a big one
That'll be
again.
back, huh? All right.
Well, not necessarily bad because it depends on if if we're at the table, like, which we will.
Right.
It depends on just making sure that they are sustainable and that we have the ability for that 30-year fixed rate mortgage to be protected, and also for taxpayers to be protected, to not see ebbs and flows and things like the use of G fees, guarantee fees, and others. And so we every conversation that we have had with Treasury or FHFA have been very positive, but we also want to make sure that if Congress is going to take it up, that it's something that we're involved with.
Thanks for doing a little fortune telling for us. We won't hold you to these, but we still love picking the expert's brain. So
Azim and Grant, do you want to ask her one final question?
Azim, come on.
So being the advocacy czar that you are, there you go. That should be your new title, huh?
There
We
you
should
go.
do that.
Advocacy. Sorry, I love it.
So Shannon McGann, advocacy czar. What's the biggest myth or misconception that you think is out there, and how would we help you correct that?
Oh gosh. I kind of touched on it, but I'll get to it a little bit more. The idea that there's a massive advocacy organization here at NAR and what we're doing only happens in Washington. That is one of I think the biggest misconceptions. And as I mentioned, with those 19 cents a day that we're spending millions of dollars going back to fight things like in Massachusetts, they're looking at a statewide rent control ballot initiative. In Nevada, we're always focused on those rent control type issues. Oregon, California, this happens around the country and also at the local level too, where we'll put those resources behind independent expenditures for candidates. It could be a mayor's race, or it could be a city council race, or that we'll do what's called issues mobilization, which is how do you do a campaign around a particular issue, and with incredibly high success rates. So the idea that it's only in Washington, nope, that those funds are going all around the country. And the other one is that advocacy is partisan. We know housing is not a Republican issue. It's not a Democratic issue. It is an American issue. We work with policymakers across the political spectrum. You'd be surprised to see who gets along and who doesn't sometimes on these things. But some of the strongest housing reforms happening today are being led in a very bipartisan way in state legislatures and in communities around the country. And that's what advocacy is behind. And that's what we're there to do.
As a recipient of financial support from NAR for our rent control campaign, we can certainly firsthand attest to that what the work you do is not only in DC. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, that's
We see those impacts right here in Nevada, right here in our local associations. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we could not have done the rent control campaign that we've done the last several years without NAR's issues mobilization help. And again, for us, once we have the assets and the op-eds and all the things, we're happy to share across the country with other states so they don't have to reinvent the wheel. And we couldn't have done it without the partnership and support. So thank you. Continued ongoing support.
Unbelievable.
We're happy to be a part of it. And these are your resources. And our job is to make sure it's getting deployed in the right way at the right time.
Yeah, we're truly grateful for your time today. This has been enlightening, and I know it'll be super informative to our members.
I learned a
I
lot.
look forward to seeing you all in June.
Yeah.
We look forward to it. And then
Thank you, Shannon, so much for taking. We know how busy you are. We know you've got to go lobby those legislators up on the hill for us.
Advocate. I'm going to go advocate. Yes.
That's right. No, you said it's not a dirty word. It's okay. It's a First Amendment protected right. Go do it. We really appreciate you fighting our battles and representing Nevada realtors and homeowners all across the country. Thank you for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Grant. Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you, Azim. And I look forward to seeing you soon.
We'll see you soon. Bye, Shannon.